Hello, my listeners. This is Joanna Dos Santos from Mindful Counseling. I am welcoming you here again another week. We are now in May, and I have to say that one of the things that I would like to talk about today for some time is quote unquote being frozen in time. Being frozen in time as if time has paused. So I figured it would be good to talk about it just because I feel like this is something that has been coming up more so this week with many individuals, whether in therapy or with clients or with just colleagues. And what I mean by frozen in time, that here we are in mid-May and with hopefully looking forward to summer days and what they will look like. And most of us are hopefully in a situation or hoping, naturally so, that things will be easier or that places will open up or at least have some form of normalcy to what it was back in March. So what I mean about frozen in time, I mean that our life still keeps on going. We still are doing what we're supposed to be doing in some ways. And for those of us that are working, we're still working. Unfortunately, for those that have lost their jobs, it is very difficult. And it's almost as if it's a new form of moving forward and whatever that may look like as well. So the frozen in time is that regardless of us moving forward with our jobs, with our responsibilities, we are in some ways stuck in March. And what I mean by that is for teachers that are returning to school to clean their classrooms, they're going back to see their calendars and everything that has been done in March. So it's almost like they are going back from where we are today, May, but really going back to March and how things looked back then. Now it almost sounds like it was such a century ago. It was only 2 months ago, but yet many will say how quickly the time has flown. And maybe that has to do with the fact that we are so hopeful of how things will look like, or at least that we look forward to many things happening that we kind of forget about time and time just passes. So going back into classrooms or certain stores reopening just for curbside pickup. I'm not quite sure about department stores, but if so, we're kind of going back, or they're going back towards decorations of, I think, St. Patrick's Day. So it's a little surreal at the same time, bizarre maybe, and I'm not quite sure if most of you can relate. I would think so, hope so. Maybe some of you do not, but I sense that most of us feel like we are in May, and here we're almost in summer, of how quickly time flies and has flown, because for those of us that are working, taking care of our kids and whatever other responsibilities there are, that there's almost no time to pause. And when we do, especially when it comes to some of these, going back to our offices to clean up or pick up a few things, it's almost like you're going back in time. So just a small thought that has been brought up by myself, my colleagues, clients, and many other individuals who have sort of mentioned the same thoughts and feelings of being stuck in time as time is frozen. And how do we now move forward while acknowledging that March did happen, or February or January, whenever it is that COVID has really affected us. So I think it really comes into our ability to function and move forward, that there's almost no time to process, that we are looking forward to the warm months And I think many of us can say that thankfully we have the better days or the warmer days, because it gives us the ability to step outside, to utilize our backyards, or to be outside a little bit more, even though there is a distance required in some ways. And I think we're becoming a little bit more lenient with that, with caution. I would hope so. So thankfully we're approaching or are in the warmer months and days instead of the winter season. And that's a different conversation of whether or not the second wave will come, and of course how it will affect us in the colder months. But that's still future. We're not quite sure where it will go and be. So presently it's looking forward to summer days and the hopeful things that we'll be able to do, whatever it is that we can manage, but at the same time process what has happened 2 months ago to 2.5 months ago. It is the kids, teenagers, being told, most of us being told that this will only last for 2 weeks. But I think I'm talking more from a school perspective, that it's almost like falsified information, but none of us maybe were so much aware of what will happen futuristically, that kids did not have the ability to say goodbye to their friends, and that they will see them many months, weeks later. They were under the impression that they're just going to pause school for 2 weeks and that's it. And they're just going to come back and everything's going to be back to normal. And so children are having a very difficult time with this, teenagers. So how do you go back and tell your child that unfortunately they cannot see their friends physically, to socialize, to play sports, and for quite some time? So, like I said, frozen in time. So how children are affected by this, how we are affected by this, and how are we really processing this, if processing at all. I would hope that most of us can just acknowledge the difficulty, that that March was more of a shock phase and things were just happening so rapidly that there was almost no time to think, and it was just more about doing. I think today we are in a situation where we're just doing what we can almost robotically, and that we are becoming frustrated and exhausted, and that we want some form of normalcy, rightfully so. And that normalcy is just going to look somewhat different, and it will require yet another adjustment. So I think it's important to just be aware that we are moving forward, that things eventually will get better, and that unfortunately, until we get there, it is almost not a temporary pause to our normal routines, what they were, but very long temporary pause towards our previous enjoyments and the ability to establish new enjoyments, even though they might not feel the same, but we can try. So, frozen in time. What March looked like versus to what May and June looks like. And that we dealt with very critical, huge crises in March, where most of our lifestyles were changed drastically. And that includes working remotely, that includes taking care of kids, a job that we did not necessarily signed up for, in the sense of parenting, if that makes sense, and educating, sending children to school so they can learn. And of course, that now looks a little bit different, because now we have to work as well as teaching teaching our children. So I don't mean that we did not sign up for it in a sense that we did not ever want to. It's just the fact that this was not the new normal. This was not the normal that we ever thought that we would be in. So the changes that we had to deal with for women, for men, whoever, the part of taking care of our physical self, the part of barbershops, the beauty salons, the hair, the makeup, the whatever it is that we were doing that provided us with some comfort. And that has changed in many ways too. So once again, of how many things were almost put on hold or have changed because of what happened in March. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that this part of moving forward, but yet frozen in time, things have been paused, feels a little strange, feels a little weird, different, and that months are just kind of passing by. And some of us have said things such as 2020 is probably the worst year ever, or 2020 is almost like a faded year, a year that most of us probably don't want to remember. Whether true or not, I'm not quite sure how most of you feel about it. So these are just some of the things that have been coming up more so this week in a sense of where we are. I think it's the 10th week into this whole situation, if not more. I feel like I have lost the count, and I think that has to do with the fact that we're accepting a little bit more of what we're doing, that we're not necessarily waiting for tomorrow to be back to normal, because we know that's not going to happen. But I think we're looking for some form of assurance for future, so that way we can move forward. But to also not forget that, yes, even though May and April and March has flown by so quickly, not to forget that it did exist, that things have happened, and there was different types of feelings involved during that time, and that feelings still are here, and some of us may communicate them better than others. Some of us might deal with our feelings more internally, which then can be expressed differently. So I think it's also important to be able to just address and just to pause for a moment and just to acknowledge where you were in March and April and where you are today in May. That even though we're going and moving forward by our different forms of responsibilities, that we have almost traveled in time or traveled forward with the ability to address that our offices, our schools still look the same as if they were then in March. And most of it is quite correct. How we have left in March the things that we didn't have time to clean. It was just more in preparation for the next few weeks. So we left things as they were. And whenever it is that we go back, we're going to go back to how we left it. Not just yesterday, but many weeks ago. So just to be mindful. This is just one of those conversations I figured I would have today based on just the week's events and the conversations and the topics and the thoughts that have been coming up, to not forget that we're moving forward, that time has in some ways paused or frozen in time based on where March was, but to, I think, also just address and to acknowledge that it was difficult. And for some of you, it still may be difficult, but not to forget that through crises, we also survive and we move forward and we can get better. We can be healthier, that we can look at this situation as something that can give us strength and endurance to survive, to be better, to look forward to bigger and better things. Until next time, be well.